Hey guys, you know the drill of these videos. I'll be checking its story, gameplay, graphics and music. Also be sure to see the timestamps for the specific details you wanna hear. Without further ado, was it worth playing Record of Agarest War? This story begins narrating how at some point in time there was nothing, light, darkness, day nor night, and 12 gods were created out of a single body. Those 12 gods were the seeds for what was known as Agarest. However, things were not as simple because light and darkness came to be. That alone brought countless wars. Nonetheless, Sumeriel, the Lord of Darkness, would bring much more with him. And even after being defeated 3 times, things wouldn't change. After many confrontations, just 6 gods remained. 6 gods that once again brought life to Agarest. And that is how thousands of years passed, where things seems to be peaceful. However, darkness starts to grow once again. After that small introduction, we can see how our main character, Leonhard, has a nightmare where he's being defeated by a dark knight. It seems natural as he's being deployed for an imminent war, where he questions if being a soldier is just following orders. After some small confrontations, we can see how he tries to save a small high elf, thing that ended up in his death. After being defeated, in a moment of opportunity, he's asked by an unknown woman if he's willing to offer his soul among his descendants to cleanse the world. That is how this story begins. After this point, the narrative is going to follow Leonhard's story along his descendants. It has a quite strong beginning, I am not gonna lie. This chronicle is filled with tons of political issues around every corner, how the duality of mankind breaks itself because of desires, ignorance, weakness in its heart, among some other things. In my book, that alone would make this story a 9, but that I cannot say it, because it has a kind of slow pace. Now add that to the classic idea factory moments and you make the star wonder if this is a story for you. As always, I'll be honest, they don't bother me, but the pace of the story was something that I questioned myself. However, what kept me playing this game was how every generation is portrayed for entirely different characters. Sure, Leonhard seems to be the kind of charismatic soldier who's willing to put himself in the line of fire. However, as you proceed in these generations, you will see different perspectives and entirely different behaviors, and I won't deny that some characters were a bit annoying, but after putting yourself in their shoes and what their life represents, I ended up liking how this story flowed. I mean, they question a lot of heavy topics, like what if you are from another race? What if you live for a lot of years? What if you think your life has just one purpose? It went quite philosophical and I liked that a lot. The climax of all of this is brought in the 5th generation, where a lot of the main characters have already fought for over 100 years. Prior to that, you are going to be shown some of the classic idea factory events that might put off a lot of people. In my humble opinion, some of those moments were a lot of fun, and some others are the classic ones. But if you like a story for what it is, I gotta say, it was quite good. To me, it is an 8. For its gameplay, it is a quite complex game despite its looks, because you have to link characters one another, so you can deal nasty combos to the enemies. That way you can finish battles as fast as possible, because depending how long you take, you are going to be given extra money, items and points for other things. At first these fights are going to be kinda slow, because you cannot really do a lot of things, but as you proceed you'll be able to deal combos of over 100 hits. Nonetheless, I gotta say that is what makes this game quite hard. Sure, it gives you the chance to choose difficulties, but I wanted a normal playthrough. However, I was bitten the shit out of me in the tutorial. After that, I knew which kind of game this one was going to be. Don't force yourself to make the perfect arrangements in your first generation, because it is hard. But as you proceed, try to further understand how some characters share their extended areas, because that is going to make the difference in harder battles. A good chunk of its gameplay is just moving from point A to point B in the world map. Per generation you will have to fight around 60-80 fights, considering that you didn't change that much your route as you proceed, which is going to be important as this game takes that quite seriously. There are also some quest areas where you will be given the chance to fight many times without considering a turn in the overall story. The game more or less works in this way: get into fights, get items, money, then get your first books in the store, craft your first weapons, unlock new titles in the guild, rinse and repeat until you reach the second generation. Choose wisely who you're going to marry, because depending from that, the next hero is going to have different stats. Start capturing monsters. They can be used to improve your characters much more. Keep completing as many titles as possible, because then you will get the smithing books out of them, as well as some quest areas, and keep hunting monsters. I cannot stress this enough, because you will need lots of materials and weapons. If you follow that recipe, you'll be able to get up to the 5th generation without that much of an issue. Otherwise, you are going to be beaten to pieces. And don't think that it is just that, because if you get the route for the true ending, which is not that hard, you will face the grindiest part of the game. In case you don't have a plan like me at the very least, and that is the reason why it took me so long. In the final stretch of the game, you will have to do the exact same as I explained, but to another level, going a bit hardcore, because crafting the best weapons takes quite the time, and your normal fights feel like boss battles. Be patient. The last bosses and the gods are going to bully your entire team so hard that if you are not strong of heart, most likely you will drop this game. I definitely liked the game up to the end of the 5th generation. Sure, there were some parts that got a bit grindy, but once I got into the cycle of getting items and crafting better weapons, it doesn't matter if you are 10-15 levels below the bosses, as you can unleash the edge techniques, which deal a lot of damage, and they are going to be your primary way to beat everything that is tough. But that last generation, oh my god, it's going to be rough, and I gotta be honest, I didn't like that last area. Also, depending from your alignment, there are going to be some events along the story, and also there are gimmicky areas where if you do an event first than others, sometimes they disappear, but at least I gotta praise that. It is not like other games where you're asked questions and they don't matter. To me, its gameplay is an 8. It is quite solid, but it can turn quite repetitive after a while. And for the graphics, here I checked the performance, creativity and some other things regarding the visual part, and they are not the strongest point in this game, and it would be dumb from my side if I were to compare it with a AAA game, as Idea Factory is not that kind of company. For the technical part, just when I played in handheld mode against some enemies, the frames usually dropped a bit, making the game a bit laggy, which can be annoying. Other than that, if I played on docked mode, I have no issues. The overall idea was quite interesting for me, because you have 2D characters and some 3D monsters, but what put me a bit off is that some of those monsters just look so awkward whenever they start throwing their best combos. The 3D modeling here is not the worst, but it is far from the best. Something that can be tiring is that you will see the same scenery over and over again, as well as the quest areas and enemies. The classic scene in RPGs is brought in this one once again, as you will see repainted enemies a good chunk of time. However, a good number of them have interesting designs. I definitely like them. For its story, you will see the classic Idea Factory approach, going for the visual novel stuff. Here what caught my attention was the overall character design. I mean, sometimes in other games they just throw the classic races like orcs, high elves, humans, dwarves and stuff like that. But here they went a bit further with some other species, and that adds a lot of diversity in this world. And it is also interesting to look at some of the first sketches for allies, and something that I love so much is that they discarded a classic cat girl, instead going for a bunny girl. For me, the graphics are a 7. And last but not least, it's music. For some reason this game brings me back to the early 2000s and 80s. A good chunk of its soundtrack was inspired by neoclassical metal. That is what you will hear in their common battle themes and some boss tracks. But also they bring something like techno for some other combat tracks, along the classic Idea Factory tracks when the characters are going to do something really dumb or just for the ambience. The only negative point for me is that I would have liked to hear different combat themes in each generation. It's just in the number of tracks. While it is true that they are extraordinary, After hearing it for over 100 times, you want to hear something a bit different, just to keep things a bit fresh. Other than that, I believe the OST accomplishes its purpose quite well. It is a 9. Record of Agarest War final score is an 8. It is a good game, but I would only recommend it for those who are patient and like quite complex stories with silly moments and fan service, with challenging battles. Otherwise, this may not be a game for you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.